Christopher leaned in as we approached the entrance of the Whitmore estate, lowering his voice to a whisper sharpened by nerves. "Try not to embarrass me tonight. These people are way above your level." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. I simply walked beside him through the tall oak doors, as if I hadn't heard a single word. And when the host spotted me rush toward me, extended his hand like we were old friends, and said, "We've all been waiting to meet you," I watched Christopher's face blanch so quickly it was almost poetic. A perfect unraveling, a truth he'd never bothered to look for, arriving too late to save him from himself. For 3 weeks, I'd listened to his lectures, 3 weeks of comments disguised as guidance. Make sure you get your hair done professionally. Buy a new dress, something sophisticated but not flashy. Just smile and let me handle conversations. He said each line as if I were a child preparing for a school recital, not a grown woman who'd built a career he'd never cared to understand. He believed he was helping me, preparing me, elevating me so I wouldn't embarrass him in front of successful people, and I'd nodded, patient and quiet, letting him think I needed his direction. Because the whole time, every single day he was coaching me, I was working on the building where this exclusive dinner would be held, the historic Whitmore estate, the project I'd spent 14 months restoring from crumbling grandeur to architectural brilliance. The project that would win me a regional preservation award before the year was out. The project I discussed weekly with the host he was so desperate to impress. Christopher had no idea. He'd never asked what I was working on. Never asked whom I was working for. Never connected the dots between the invitation on our counter and the blueprints in my bag. Why would he? In his mind, I was an accessory to his ambition, a pleasant addition to his life, someone smart enough to impress his friends but not quite enough to understand his world. My name is Natalie, and this is the story of how I let my husband underestimate me, and how it cost him everything. I'm 34, and I've spent 15 years becoming someone my own husband never took the time to know. I'm a historic preservation architect, something very different from the glossy stereotype people imagine when they hear architect. I don't design glass towers or luxury condos. I resurrect lost causes, factories abandoned for decades, theaters left to rot, buildings with foundations that crumble at the touch, projects that require patience, engineering precision, historical fluency, and an endurance most people don't possess. Last year, my firm brought in $2 million in revenue. I've been featured in Architectural Digest twice. I've restored 8 landmarks. I have awards on my office shelf and a national recognition from the Historic Preservation Foundation. 3 years ago, I stood on a stage in Boston giving a keynote speech to 200 architects who took notes while I spoke. But none of that would be obvious to Christopher, who rarely looked up from his phone long enough to notice anything about me that wasn't convenient for his narrative. To him, I looked like someone still on her way up, not someone who'd arrived years ago. My work uniform was steeled, owed boots, canvas pants, a coffee, dependent messy bun. I drove a dusted Honda CR-V stuffed with blueprints and samples. My nails were short, my hands calloused. He never minded my competence as long as it didn't overshadow his. He never minded my success as long as it stayed small, quiet, and out of his spotlight. We met at a friend's wedding. He was polished, confident, charming in a curated way. Tailored suit, expensive watch, the smoothness of a man who'd never had to climb for anything. He asked about my work, listened with interest, laughed in the right places. We dated. He moved into my house, my foreclosure project turned masterpiece, the one I'd renovated entirely on my own. He loved to show it off, always as our home, never mentioning that the sweat equity was mine alone. Our relationship looked balanced at first, 2 professionals, 2 careers, 2 lives moving in parallel, but conversation flowed only one way, his office politics, his career milestones, his aspirations. When I spoke about my projects, he nodded without hearing, smiled without absorbing. If I got excited about some structural puzzle I'd solved, he looked at me like a parent indulging a child's hobby. The shift happened slowly, disguised as helpful suggestions. Wear heels, they're more professional. Maybe try a different haircut. That dress is nice, but a recognizable label would make a stronger impression. I told myself he understood corporate worlds better than I did, that he meant well, that compromise was part of partnership. Eventually, the suggestions became instructions. You work too much. Do you have to go to every site visit? Do we really need to talk about construction over dinner? You should upgrade your wardrobe. Think about our future, not just your projects, our future, as if my career was some side quest unrelated to the life we were building. As if the thing that had shaped me, challenged me, fulfilled me, didn't count unless he was in the center of it. Then came the invitation, the one that revealed everything. The evening he received it, he walked into the kitchen holding that cream-colored envelope like it contained the secrets of the universe. James Whitmore is hosting a private dinner, he said, breathless. Only 12 people and their spouses, black tie at the Whitmore estate. I remember slicing vegetables, waiting because I knew the line was coming, and there it was. I was thinking you could come with me as my date. You could. As if it were a risk. Of course, I said. I knew exactly where this was headed. For the next 3 weeks, he prepared for the dinner like it was a once-in-a-lifetime audition. He researched every attendee, built a spreadsheet with their net worths, philanthropic interests, business ventures, practiced his handshake, rehearsed conversation openers, bought a new suit, and in between all of this, he tried to prepare me. Make sure you get your hair professionally done. Buy a new dress, labels matter. Don't talk about construction, they won't understand. Let me handle conversations. These people are way out of our league. Our league. As if I hadn't spent months inside James Whitmore's home. As if James and I hadn't debated restoration strategies in his study. As if he didn't call me for updates, ask my advice, trust my expertise. As if I hadn't been the one transforming his ancestral estate into the crown jewel of the city. I remember one night, after a 14-hour day at the site, telling Christopher I might be working late for the next couple of weeks. He barely looked up. Okay, just don't forget the dinner with my boss on the 15th. No curiosity, no interest, not even a why. He never asked what building I was restoring. He never listened long enough to hear the name Whitmore. So I let him talk, let him coach me through smiling correctly, speaking sparingly, dressing elegantly. I let him believe he was the star of the evening and I was the supporting role. The day before the dinner, he brought home a bracelet, delicate, expensive, shimmering in its little box. Wear this tomorrow. It's elegant, the kind of detail they'll notice. He kissed my forehead. I just want you to feel comfortable. This isn't really your scene. I thought of the call I'd had earlier that afternoon, James thanking me for salvaging the original molding in the ballroom, saying he couldn't wait for the unveiling. I wondered what Christopher would say if he knew the client he'd worshipped from a distance had spent hours with me discussing his family's legacy. But Christopher didn't ask about my day. He hadn't asked in weeks. By Friday night, he was pacing through a full final briefing. He listed the heavy hitters, told me who mattered most, which conversations would be strategic, which would be dangerous for someone unfamiliar with the environment. I listened with the calmness of someone who already knew how the story would end. The next evening, I dressed in the elegant black dress I'd picked. He looked me over and nodded approvingly, like a coach signing off on a uniform. We drove through the city in silence, his anticipation humming like static beside me, and then we walked into the Whitmore estate. The building glowed. Not just because of the lighting, but because I knew every inch of it, every column I'd reinforced, every beam I'd saved, every detail I'd agonized over. My fingerprints were everywhere. Christopher didn't notice. But the staff did, the board members did, and James Whitmore did. He crossed the room with the eager energy of someone greeting a collaborator. His hand closed around mine. Natalie, I'm so glad you're here. Everyone's been waiting to meet the architect who brought this place back to life. Christopher froze beside me. I felt rather than saw his confusion, felt the moment it shifted into realization, felt every assumption he'd ever made disintegrate in the space of 5 seconds. James turned to him politely. And you must be her husband, not the rising financial analyst, not the strategic guest, not the man with the plan, just my husband. Christopher's mouth opened, closed, opened again, and for the first time since I'd known him, he had no script prepared. No clever introduction, no authority. He didn't know what world he'd stepped into because he'd never bothered to learn the one I lived in. The entire night unfolded like a slow, inevitable truth finally being spoken. Guests asked me about the restoration, complimented the craftsmanship, thanked me for the work. Christopher stood beside me, pale and silent, absorbing the undeniable fact that I was not the liability he'd feared. I was the centerpiece of the evening. He had prepared for a kingdom that turned out to be mine, and I didn't gloat. I didn't say a single "I told you." Oh, I didn't need to. He felt it every time someone addressed me first. He saw it in every appreciative glance, every question directed my way, every moment someone recognized my name. That night was the beginning of the end, not because of humiliation, though he carried plenty of that, but because he finally saw the truth. I had never been beneath his level, he had been beneath mine.